finding anything or wanting to meet with somebody or whatever, you are welcome to grab anybody that's got one of these blue jackets. That's why we're all wearing them today, so one of the WIT folks. But I've got a list real quick of some housekeeping items. But first of all, I want to thank all of our speakers and our sponsors. You'll meet them all today, and we're really excited to have everybody out and want to thank everybody for coming. So from a housekeeping perspective, we're doing kind of a high school kind of scheduling format, so basically a session and then a 10-minute break so you can get to your next class. So there's going to be two tracks. Track A is basically customer success stories or companies that are using BI and have had a great experience with it and want to talk about their story. So those meetings will all be in here. And then there's going to be our vendor partners who are going to be showing off their products and what they can do for you in the Windover room, which is going to be down the hall. There's a sign just outside. It's not the next room. The next room is labor relations. So unless you want to talk about labor law, keep going to the Windover room. During lunch, we're going to have our charity partner, Gleaners Food Bank, talk for just a few minutes while we're eating to kind of talk about what they're doing. Actually, their VP of IT is going to talk about some of the things that's going on within their office, so that's cool. And then at 4:30, when the summit ends, we're going to be raffling off a Microsoft Surface tablet. So for those intrepid folks that are still with us at 4:30, you get a chance to win that. Must be present to win, so only fair that way. How we're going to do that, actually, how we're going to start the raffle itself is, if you look in your packet, there's a modestly light gray feedback form. So you fill out the form, you hand it to one of our folks, they'll give you a raffle ticket, and that's how we're actually going to enter you in to the raffle. There's a way that you can actually get a second raffle ticket to get your name in there twice. We've got a videographer outside that's just basically taking a 20, 30-second kind of blurb on what you thought of the summit. You can stop by at any point today and just have a very quick conversation. Basically, we're going to ask you what you think of the event and record that, and you get another ticket, so get in twice. We're going to be doing some Michigan-themed gifts. So at every break, we're going to draw some names of the registrants out of a hat and give them some form of Michigan-based gift. I have no idea what those are. But we're going to actually write the names of the winners on a whiteboard. So if you see your name, feel free to stop by and pick up your gift. We'll have lots of snacks. I think you've probably figured out where to put your coats, but there's a coat rack over there. There's another one right outside this door here. If you want to get onto the Wi-Fi, open a browser, and it'll ask for some registration for the Westin Hotel and that sort of thing. But the password is WIT, so pretty simple. All right, so in the spirit of going green, we're asking that everybody recycle the lanyards so we can use them again next year. Assuming that people like this event this year, we're going to have it again next year. And the date for that is 2014, March 13th, so one day prior to today. Looking for some good feedback from everybody in the audience. So we're already going to have a pony and a dancing bear. Somebody requested that. I think that's a great idea. So anyhow, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Donald Farmer from QlikTech, and he's going to talk about the BI for the right side of the brain.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I've got this, so it's fine. Well, thank you. Thank you to WIT especially for inviting me here, and it's great to be here in Michigan. I used to come here quite a lot at one time when I worked as a consultant, and I must say it's a few years since I've been here, and it's great to be back and see all the changes that are taking place and talk to people about some of the developments that are happening. I was in Singapore last week and talking with venture capitalists there as part of what I do, and they were all asking me about the kind of resurgent tech economy in Detroit and how significant it is that Detroit is becoming the center of new software development and incoming investment, and especially venture capital investment in software startups. So it's been, that was very timely for me to get an opportunity to come here today. So today, the theme of my presentation is BI for the right side of the brain, and it's maybe a little bit different from the conventional tech presentation that you'll get. And I typically start this subject with a little experiment, little something you can try. And what I'd like you to do is just very briefly close your eyes. Just close your eyes. And what I'd like you to do is describe the room to yourself. Just close your eyes gently and just describe the room that we're in to yourself. And once you've done that, just kind of open them up again and see how good your description was. But it's not difficult to describe the room, is it? We've all been in rooms like this many, many times. It's the ballroom, it's the hotel ballroom, there's a screen, there's a speaker, there's rows of tables, there's a projector. This is all pretty common stuff, and it's quite easy to describe. However, how many of you actually describe to yourself something unique about this room? I actually bet that when you closed your eyes and described the room to yourself, you could have been describing any room, any hotel ballroom anywhere in the world where a speaker is giving a presentation. Because what you do when you describe the room to yourself is you use what psychologists call a schema. That is, you know what these rooms are like, and so you can describe it to yourself. In the same way as if you, for example, if I asked you to describe a dog, or I asked you to describe a submarine, you could do that, but you wouldn't be describing a specific dog or a specific submarine. You'd be describing based on your general experience of these things. And we call that a schema. And that's kind of interesting for data people because we use the word schema as well. And in fact, we use the word schema to mean something very similar, which is it's a generalized model. The schema is not reality. The schema is our picture, our version of reality. And there are many differences between reality and our schema. And in fact, the schema is very good for finding the generalized model and explaining the generalized model. You can do that instantly. The schema is almost useless for describing the very specific things. The schema doesn't help you describe the specifically unique things about this room. The schema of a dog doesn't help you describe the very specific things about that particular dog, or the schema of a submarine doesn't help you describe the specific of a submarine. In fact, I don't think I've got an idea of what a specific submarine would be like. I only have a schema of that kind of object. So, PI for the right side of the brain, to a certain extent, is going to be about how we break through from generalized schemas to discovering specifics about our business and about how our business is represented. And when we do that, I've got to tell you that we're very confused as human beings about this subject. We all think we're logical. We make decisions in a logical way, and I can tell you that when you construct decision support systems, and I'll be honest here, I still prefer the name decision support to business intelligence. I remember starting in this field when we called it decision support, and it's a much better name because it tells you what the software does. It supports you in making decisions. But the marketing guys get to it, and it becomes business intelligence, and nobody knows what that means, and I have to spend an hour explaining it to you. I can explain business intelligence in 2 words, decision support, and it's as simple as that. But when we make decisions, we construct these dashboards and reports and decisioning systems around the idea that we make logical decisions. We all think we're Dr. Spock. Not Dr. Spock, Mr. Spock. Dr. Spock's the baby guy, isn't it? Yeah. And so we construct our dashboards, we construct our decision flow charts, and we assume we're all doing it logically. It is not so. Let me ask you another question as an experiment. Did you enjoy your breakfast this morning? Good. Nobody shouted out no, which is you're either very polite or, in fact, you're all very happy with your breakfast. There's an interesting experiment you can run, and we did this. My boss, Anthony, did and ran this experiment himself because he didn't quite believe the results. And he ran it using Amazon Mechanical Turk. And he asked people the question, did you enjoy your breakfast? Now, that's a very objective question. When I ask you that right now at 10 minutes past 9, you've already had your breakfast. Well, sorry, the guy in the front row is still having his, but I'll ask you later. But most of us have already had our breakfast, so you've already enjoyed it or not. Yeah? Me asking you the question should not affect whether you enjoyed your breakfast or not. But if I ask you the question, did you enjoy your breakfast, and I show you a picture of this poor guy being sick off the coast of Cape Cod, and I'm sorry that you're just about to enjoy your breakfast, and I'm giving you this. If I show you that picture and ask you, did you enjoy your breakfast? There is a statistically significant number of people who will say they did not enjoy their breakfast. As opposed to if I show you this happy, smiling, pretty girl and say, did you enjoy your breakfast? And significantly more people will say, yes, I enjoyed my breakfast. Now, this is an event which has already happened. This is after the event. You've already enjoyed your breakfast or not enjoyed it a couple of hours ago, but I can affect your answer by showing you a picture. And this is something that is completely within your own grasp, this subject, and yet I can affect your answer simply by showing you a picture. And you might say, well, that's okay, because enjoying your breakfast is a kind of emotional thing, so of course you're going to be affected by that. But actually, our judgment in supposedly very rational issues is also affected. And there's a couple of really interesting cases here. There's a survey which has been done in Israel, and the results of this were rather shocking. The results were that judges in real cases, real judges sitting in real courts, handed down sentences which were on average twice as serious, twice as severe before the afternoon coffee break compared to after the afternoon coffee break. In other words, if you have the bad luck to be sentenced before the judge has his afternoon coffee, the chances are your sentence will be double the next guy who comes afterwards. Now, these judges are trained. They're experienced, they're qualified, they're supposed to be making rational, objective decisions based on the facts of the case before them. But they're actually affected by the fact that they haven't had coffee and a cookie. And that's very worrying. In Germany, they done a similar experiment, not with real cases, but still an experiment with judges, where they took judges into an interview room, and they started to ask them to score certain cases. And what they did was they sat them down with some case paperwork and said, give a typical sentence for this case. And they did about 10 of these cases. While the judge was waiting to start the experiment, they had some books on the coffee table in front of them. And one of the books was a photo book of graveyards, and graveyards all around Germany. And the other experiment they ran was a photo book of birds and beautiful birds and wildlife. And they also, of course, ran experiments without books in order to do a kind of holdout experiment. And what they found was, again, the sentences, if the judges were looking at pictures of death and graveyards, were not twice, but 8 times. 8 times more severe than the sentences the judges gave if they looked at pictures of birds and pretty flowers and wildlife. And so again, these are people who are trained in making objective judgments, and yet their judgments are incredibly influenced by their emotions and by the emotional context in which they make these decisions. And if we're in the field of decision support and we don't know this, and we don't act on this, then we may be missing the most significant inputs to the decisions that we are supporting. And this is why I call this BI for the right side of the brain, because I think that's important. I think that's significant. I think that's something you should be aware of. Let's do another quick experiment. What about complete this sentence? I've had chips. Anybody else? Somebody said foul. Yeah? Yeah. Who would normally say fish and chips? How many people thought fish and chips? Yeah, the vast majority. There's always one, fish and fowl. I did this in Oregon recently. It was fish and wildlife, but mostly people say fish and chips. You can complete that sentence pretty easily anyway. Okay, so fish and chips, fish and fowl, fish and wildlife. What about this? Oh, come on, it's a tech audience. Somebody must. 391. I only know that because I did it on the calculator before. That's not quite so easy, is it? And again, this comes back to the experiment we did at the beginning about the schema. You've got a schema for completing the sentence, fish and chips. In fact, you can hardly stop yourself completing that sentence with one of the automatic phrases that leaps to mind. Of course, it's fish and chips, or fish and wildlife, or fish and fowl. But this, you have to work this one out. It just doesn't come automatically. You just don't, very few people will look at this and say 391. Typically there's generally one, but that's fair enough. So it's interesting that on the one hand, there's an automatic response, and on the other hand, there isn't. You have to use a different system of thinking, in other words, to get to this. And it's not just on trick questions like that. Let me show you a perfectly reasonable English sentence. Does this make sense? So people are shaking their head. This is a perfectly reasonable English sentence. I was on vacation, and there was a whole bunch of us, and we were going out to an island, and the young people took the canoes, and the old manned the boat. Because we had a boat and canoes. So the old people manned the boat. The old manned the boat. Perfectly straightforward. Except we call this a garden path sentence, because in fact it trips you up. You start reading it, and of course you read the old man, because that's how you expect the sentence to go, and then you can't fit the word the boat in. But in fact, the old man the boat is a perfectly good sentence. And this is, again, part of our problem when we try and fall, well, when we don't try, we can't help, but fall into this automatic cycle of completing our ideas. We just naturally say fish and chips. We try and read the old man the boat, and it doesn't make sense to us. And in fact, it can be very difficult to walk back up the garden path and reparse that sentence, because we're already so fixed in our mind that it says the old man that it's very difficult to undo the logic of that. And again, you think of decision support systems, and where is all this going? It's going to the point that you don't necessarily enable your users to make smartest decisions by appealing to their logical brain. Because you know what? Your brain actually isn't that logical. If you can be misled by something as simple as the emotions and seeing, a picture of a guy feeling unwell in the morning, a completely objective question like, did you enjoy your breakfast? And I can influence your answer by showing you a photograph. What on earth is happening inside your companies when people are making important decisions? What context are they making them in? And what can we do to help? So let's come to that. I think the challenge facing us as IT people, as designers of decision support systems, and as thinkers about these problems is actually very simple. We don't know if we should be leading our customers, and by customers I mean our internal customers, the users of our dashboards, the users of our decision support systems, our intelligence. We don't know if we should be leading them in this direction, or should we be following them? Should we be looking at what they do and building systems effectively that they ask for? I think if you can't decide if you're leading or following, you're actually going to end up in a bit of a mess. And this is a huge challenge for IT departments all the time. Do I need to be ahead of my users, or do I need to follow my users? Do I follow the business users? Do I try and lead them in the direction that I need to go? If you get it wrong, you end up like this guy. So, what advice can I give you about designing for this emotional right side of the brain? I think I need to come back to a typical business intelligence user. And let's start with this guy. And this guy lives in my garden, and he likes to climb up in my maple tree and eat the maple nuts, and the hazel tree and eat the hazelnuts and everything else that's going on. And he uses a business intelligence technique. Actually, not even business intelligence. He uses basically the same technique as you use. How does he find the tree with all the best nuts in it? He Googles for it. Well, not quite Googles for it. I mean, he's pretty smart, but he doesn't quite Google for it. But he does actually use the same technique. He uses a technique that we call foraging. And foraging simply means that if you're not a naturalist and you watch these little squirrels in the trees, it looks like they're just hopping from tree to tree, trying to find trees with nuts in it. But actually they're doing something more than that. They're following clues. They don't just leap randomly from tree to tree. I don't see him in the pine tree looking for nuts because they don't have nuts. When it comes to that time of year that he's looking to stock up his granary, he's in the trees with the right kinds of fruit in them, because he can read the clues. He can read the information clues. And not only that, in a tree, he doesn't eat every single nut in the tree. He'll wander around the tree while it's easy to collect nuts. And then once he's collected so many that there are relatively few left, and he has to be jumping all around the tree and using more energy than it's worth, he goes to the next tree because there's no more nuts and berries than that one. So in other words, he has two calculations he has to do. The first one is, what kind of tree is going to give me the right results? And the second one is, how much energy should I spend when I'm there to get the results that I want? How good are the results that I'm getting? And as soon as the results are not very interesting, he's going to move on to the next tree. He doesn't exhaust his resources before he moves on. He moves on when the return on his investment isn't good enough. And that foraging technique is exactly the same as we use when we Google, or we use Baidu, or we use S-Search if we happen to be in China or Thailand. Because when you Google, you use a technique that's been described by Peter Paroli as information foraging. All these are search engines. And search engines have three things in common. The first is they have really the world's simplest user interface. It's a text box and a button. If you're Google, you get two buttons, but you're the market leader, so you're allowed that luxury. The other thing they have in common is they return vast amounts of information, millions of results. I mean, if you go on there and search for hotels in Michigan, hotels in Detroit, you'll get back 1 million hits. And there are not 1 million hotels in Detroit, though the super shuttle driver seems to think so sometimes. But you get this result, you get millions of results. And you get it very, very quickly. So the third thing they have in common is you browse the results. You don't think back to the early days of the internet, and I guess I'm old enough to remember this. Do you remember Alta Vista and Lycos and search engines like that? If you wanted to get good results from Alta Vista and Lycos, you had to effectively learn a query language. You had to remember to put the plus sign in front of things. If you were looking for business hotels in Detroit, it would be hotels, Detroit, plus business, minus tourist, and you'd put things in inverted commas. You were effectively constructing a query. You used the AND operator, the OR operator. You were constructing a query because the results you got back actually weren't very good. You had to be very precise in your query in order to get back the best results. And you just don't do that anymore. You just say, you can do it. Google has all these facilities there. But you get so many results, and they're so good, and they're so fast, that you just browse. What you do is you forage. You're looking for the information clues, what we call the information scent that comes back. And so when Google returns you 1 million results for hotels in Detroit, it doesn't give you every detail of every hotel. It gives you kind of one line and one little line of detail about every hotel, and it gives you a few clues. And just like the squirrel looking for a tree, you don't go and investigate every single clue. You just pick the ones that you think are best. And when you go to that page, you very quickly make up your mind, am I getting a good return on investment on this page or not? And if it looks like a page which may be spam or maybe one of these kind of just a listing site that's not very interesting, you'll just click back and you'll go back to your search results and you'll forage again. And we call that technique information foraging. And the important thing about information foraging is that it is much more efficient than querying. Because in querying, you have to almost know the answer before you ask for it, because you have to be so precise in your query. First of all, you have to know how to construct the query, and then you have to construct the right query in order to get the results. And that's unnatural for a human being. What's natural for a human being is browsing and using information scent and foraging and sifting through vast amounts of information, looking for the things that are interesting to us. That's what we do. I compare it, perhaps, rather than the example of a squirrel, let's compare it to a library or a bookstore. Again, when I was at university, and it was a long time ago, if I wanted to get a book, I had to go to the university catalog, and there'd be a card catalog, and I'd sift through it, and I would find the book I wanted, and I'd write down its case number, and I'd write it out in a card, and I'd take it to the librarian, and I'd hand it over, and the librarian would go back and come back with one book. My query result. I wrote out my query, and I was specific enough. I couldn't kind of go to the librarian and say, give me books about Michigan. And the librarian would say, are you kidding? What book about Michigan? And so I have to kind of write down the exact query. I have to be specific about it, and the librarian would come back with one book. But you go into a bookstore at the airport, or you go into a bookstore downtown, or you go to a more modern library, you can browse. And when you browse, not only do you find what you're looking for, you also find a whole lot of stuff that you weren't looking for, and good stuff too. They might be better books than the one you thought you wanted. They might be more interesting books. They might be more useful. You might decide that you don't just want one, you want 2 or 3 of them. And how do you decide that? By using information sent. You forage for them. And what I mean by that is you don't look at every detail of the book. The book, if you like, think of the book as being a collection of information. You don't read the entire book in order to decide that's the one you want. You look at the cover, you look at the author name, you look at the blurb on the back, you maybe look at the index, the contents, the titles, you flick through it, look at the photographs, and say, okay, that looks interesting. And you use those clues in order to select the book. And just in the same way as websites spend a lot of time optimizing the search results and the look at the page so that as soon as you look at it, instantly you think that's the one I'm interested in. So book designers and publishers spend a lot of time making the book as attractive as possible to give you the information sent to lead you to it. And so, in the same way, so trees and flowers and plants provide information, clues, and scents to their foragers, the squirrels and hummingbirds and things, to attract them, not by giving them all the information they need, but by giving them the little clues. This is bright red. This is a particular kind of leaf. This has a red berry in it that I can see from the other end of the forest. Those are information clues. So what we need to provide in our information context are these clues that help us. And this is natural for us as human beings. We naturally explore these environments. We are hunters too. So the first thing that we can do is focus not on querying and on giving people the exact piece of information that they think they're looking for, but on enabling a browsing experience where people will find what they're looking for, but potentially all the other things in the information environment as well that they will find useful. And there's another technology which is super important for this natural experience. And that natural technology is the mobile device. Now, when I say mobile device, I've got to be a bit careful here because I was at a conference a few weeks ago and I was talking to an analyst there. It's a group of analysts actually. We're sitting around a table. And I travel everywhere with my iPad. I have my little iPad here. And I have a little keyboard that attaches to it. And we were talking about, the devices we were using. And somebody said, so you travel everywhere and you do all your work on a mobile device? And I said, yes, I do. And they said, well, I couldn't do that. And I looked at what they were doing, and they were working on a MacBook Air. And we just took my iPad with its attached keyboard and the MacBook Air, and I can tell you, the MacBook Air is a very mobile device. You can carry it anywhere. I remember having my old Osborne, kind of 35 pounds of computer kit that you used to have to lug around, and you could hardly even fit it in the overhead bin of a plane at that time. And in a sense, that was a mobile device. Why do we call an iPad or a smartphone a mobile device, but we don't call a MacBook Air a mobile device? We think of a MacBook Air as being a different class of machine. Well, one of the things about the mobile device is that it's not about mobility. It's about the interface. It's about the way you use it. You use it in quite a different manner. And the important difference is, well, let's take a couple of typical users. The important difference is that these guys can use it. And these are real examples. The gorilla can use an iPad. You can, by the way, search for gorilla or orangutan on iPad, and you'll see that I'm not kidding. Gorillas in London Zoo and in Berlin Zoo actually communicate with each other using iPads. They have FaceTime with each other because they're very social animals, and it's difficult to get enough of them in one group in a zoo, and so they use FaceTime to interact with each other. And they can do that because it's a touch interface. And they can choose the ones they want to speak to, and they can recognize each other and do that. And babies can use the iPad. As you've all seen pictures of babies on YouTube playing with the iPad. There's a great one of a baby playing with a magazine. I don't know if you've seen that. Little German kid. And they have a magazine, a kind of color magazine like Cosmopolitan. And the baby's going like this, and flicking through the magazine. And then it comes across a picture it likes, and it starts going like that on the paper. And it's trying to make the picture bigger. And the caption below says, for my baby, a magazine is just a broken iPad. And, for them, this experience is so natural. My mother-in-law is 87, and we bought her an iPad. And I was in London just very briefly, and I literally only had 30 minutes with her. I got to her apartment, gave her the iPad, spent 30 minutes showing her how to use it, and she's been using it ever since. And she says it's changed her life. And now when I talk to her on the phone or things like that, it's occasionally she asks me questions about it, and I send her photographs. Oh, we got some photographs of my son and his new dog, and she says, oh, send them to me. And I said, well, they're quite big, and she says, oh, that's okay. I can get them from the cloud. Just put them in the cloud. And she knows all this stuff. It's incredible. But she knows this because the experience is so easy. It draws her in. And there's something about this experience which is extremely natural. And the mobile experience encourages a particular kind of behavior. Not only is it easy to use, but it also encourages this behavior. This is what we call the lean back experience. If I can keep this connected, I can kind of show you what I mean by this. This is my iPad, and when you use an iPad like this, you lean back. It's kind of, you use it at arm's length, and you're kind of browsing, and it's great for that experience. As soon as I attach a keyboard to it, and I have here a little, I thought that would happen. I have here a little keyboard. As soon as I attach that keyboard, I can no longer do it. When you have an iPad at arm's length held in that casual way, what you have is a broken presentation. It'll come back. Yeah, it's Apple. It just works. Okay. Or not. There we go. So what you have is a lean back experience. This experience is optimized for browsing. You literally lean back and browse casually. It's just, you're relaxed about it. It's a great environment for browsing information. As soon as you attach a keyboard, even attach a keyboard to your iPad, but as soon as you've got a laptop, it's literally a different experience. It's now a lean forward experience. This is an experience which is optimized for specific items of work and for querying. It's a different physical kind of experience. And if you think this doesn't matter, think back to what I was saying at the beginning about how even the simplest decision about whether you enjoyed your breakfast or not can be influenced by a photograph. Think how much your interactions with data and the kind of decision making and the kind of exploration that you do, think how influenced that can be by the ways in which you interact with a device. We have a customer in the Netherlands called Hypotheek Shop. And that's probably a very bad pronunciation, but Hypotheek Shop are a retail mortgage vendor. They sell mortgages, house insurance, car insurance, and car loans, that sort of thing. And they have shops, and you can go in and you can sit down and you can kind of look for a mortgage and explore the mortgage. And they created an application for their users, which enabled those users to kind of browse and try different mortgage and loan parameters. So they could try different loan lengths and things like that, and amortization rates and all this stuff. And they had this application which they ran on a laptop, and you would go in and sit down and try it on a laptop. And they changed it over to an iPad. And the great thing about this was they didn't all change at once. It was exactly the same application, because our application runs the same on iPads as on the laptop. It's an HTML5 application. So it's exactly the same application, but some stores had iPads and some stores had laptops before they eventually kind of all moved over to iPads. The difference between those two stores was the conversion rate of people coming in and saying, while they were in the store, I want that mortgage, was 35% higher when they had the iPad. Not only was it 35% higher, that was also exactly the same difference in the amount of time that people spent exploring the data. They spent 35% more time exploring the data and were 35% more likely to actually take the mortgage there and then. And why? Difficult to say exactly why, but the conclusions our UX guys have and user research guys have been looking at is, it looks like, first of all, they were more absorbed in the data because they had a bigger chance to explore it. As a result, they trusted it more. And actually, as a result, they felt more kind of comfortable taking the mortgage. They didn't have to go in and think about it because they felt they'd explored it more. And they had literally explored it more, spent 35% more time. And this, by the way, at first we thought, well, that's the novelty of using an iPad. But it turns out that now, a year, 18 months after that's been deployed, the vast majority of users coming in to get mortgages have got iPads. So it's not like it's a novel experience for them anymore, but the results are still the same. 35% better conversion. So the other thing that we can do to encourage this natural exploratory experience is to build on the touch experience. Not the mobile experience, but the touch experience. The mobile experience is a way of enabling touch, but it's not the mobility that matters. You know that 65% of iPads don't even leave the office. They're not used by people who are on the road visiting customers all the time. They're just used in the office. You might take them to the conference room or the next cubicle, but you're not taking them on the road. It's not the mobility so much as the touch experience that actually changes the relationship of the user to their data. The other thing we can do that's really significant is to remember that we are social animals, social beings. And that's fundamentally important to our experience as well. Nearly all the things that I've described to you have actually had a social element to it as well. It's the fact that we're social animals that enables us to be emotionally affected by the things that are out there in the outside world. But the emotional impact has another important purpose. And it comes down to these kind of sites. It so happens that if you're Google, who are you worried about as a competitor? You know, you're not typically worried that much. I mean, I've still got shares on Microsoft. I was there for 10 years. I wish they were worried about Bing. They probably aren't. And I know Microsoft's next door, and that sounds a bit harsh, but it's true. Google are probably not that competitively worried by them. What they're competitively worried about is sites like Facebook. And why would they be worried by Facebook rather than Bing? Because Bing's another search engine after all. Well, it's all got to do with how you make decisions. If I'm searching for a hotel in Detroit, and I get my millions of hits, and I search through those results, how do I choose one? Well, I may choose one, by doing my careful research and going through my decision support process and carefully analyzing which one has, the facilities that I want, which one has a gym, and which one has a bar, and which one has the right kind of rooms or whatever. Or I might just do the obvious thing, which is ask someone. I'm coming to Detroit for a couple of days. What's a good hotel? And I take advice from people. And that's the big challenge to Google. If they're driven by advertising, where are you going to put your advertising dollars? Are you going to put your advertising dollars where people do research or where people make decisions? And if you make decisions based on social input, you want to be on the social side. And so Google are worried about this, and this is why you have Google+, because we make our decisions socially. And socially means collaboratively. Socially means engaged with each other. It doesn't mean the way that we do things in the IT world. The way we do things in the IT world is we structure our users. We structure our organizations, and we structure them hierarchically. Now, hierarchies are very natural. Everybody can understand a hierarchy. A couple of dogs can understand a hierarchy. That's pretty natural. It's a very natural process. And when we construct our business environments, we construct hierarchies. And we lay out, our offices with all our cubicles and so on, and everybody's got a well-defined role, and everybody's got a well-defined task. Everybody probably has a well-defined set of permissions to view the data. And we create this highly organized structure. And in fact, we tell ourselves it must be this way. This is good governance, to organize things in this highly structured, hierarchical, managed manner. The problem with this is it's entirely unnatural, and it leads to entirely unnatural results. In this case, new details released in death of county worker found in cubicle. This was somebody who died in their cubicle and wasn't found until Saturday afternoon. It's not a natural working environment to work in these isolated, well-defined, rigid ways. And even in cubicle land, we don't actually work that way. Our communications, our engagement as human beings is far more freeform. It's far more peer-to-peer. We talk across the cubicle. We meet at the water cooler. We meet over the coffee break. We have lunch together. And information flows in those environments. You all think you're locking down your data and it's secure because there's a system. Active Directory doesn't protect your data if people are talking about the numbers at the water cooler. An Active Directory doesn't apply to your tongue. An Active Directory doesn't apply to the fact that you can just stick in a USB key and take the data anyway. I worked at a brokerage once, consultancy, and this was at the time of the financial crisis when it was all breaking. This was around like 2008, and the world was collapsing around these guys. And there was an analyst there at the brokerage who had done some really interesting analysis of personal credit scores of key investors against their holdings in the brokerage. And he was not supposed to have that data. There was one set of data he was supposed to have, but he wasn't supposed to have access to the other set. And yet he was doing this mashup and sharing it. And the security guys, the IT security guys said, how did you do this? This is an office where they literally super glue shut the USB ports so people can't put in USB sticks. And he said, oh, it's easy enough. I just used my iPhone, took a photograph of the screen, put it through some character recognition, scraped it off, got it in Excel, mashed it up. There's the results. At this point, the IT guys are beating their heads off the wall thinking, well, what can we possibly do? And the answer is you cannot do anything. Security isn't a mechanical process. It's a question of responsibility. I had another customer very close to here. And in fact, I'm almost certain there are people in this audience who work for them that I used to work with. And when I was building their data warehouse, they had the extracts from their mainframe system were in a folder which was called / cappuccino. And I said, why is this folder called cappuccino? And he said, well, we're not really supposed to have this data, but every time we get an extract, we buy the IT guy a cappuccino. And, and that was their governance system. This stuff goes on in every single office that's out there. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have security. I'm not saying you shouldn't have those controls. What I'm saying is don't kid yourself that that's what's working. Don't kid yourself that that's the way the world works, because actually we have this massive communications. And offices are starting to be redesigned that way. We have people who, these two offices, this is the Google office in London, this is the Microsoft office in Amsterdam. These are free-form offices. They've actually given up entirely on the idea of desks and cubicles. You just come in and on a morning, you can sit anywhere and just chat to anyone you want. And you have an entirely social relationship. And the office self-organizes around these social relationships, because it's those social relationships which determine the information flow, not your Active Directory settings, but the social environment that people are working in. And this matters to us in IT for another reason, and it comes down to something that my very good friend Scott Davis has said, which is people don't trust data. They only trust other people. This is kind of horrifying if you work in master data management or data quality in your company. But when somebody gets a report, they don't trust the report. They don't care about the lineage and metadata and the calculations. They don't care about auditing that. It's, do you build good reports or not? Do I trust my IT department to give me the right numbers? It's a personal, social trust, far more than it's a technical trust. People just don't have time to go in and audit the entire lineage of the data. That might be your job when you're managing the data, but they don't care. The business users don't care about that. They trust you to get it right or not. So here's the challenge for us then. How do we do this? How do we construct these systems which are going to meet the emotional needs of users? I'm going to tell you very simply, you have to decide. Are you going to follow or are you going to lead? And my conclusion is that you have to lead. You actually, some of this stuff will sound so fluffy and vague and unimportant that you'll think, why are we even thinking about it? But remember, it's these emotional, aesthetic influences on your users are affecting their decisions more than your lineage, your metadata. It's the social network which affects security in your organization far more than your Active Directory settings. If you ignore that, then you're really kidding yourself that you manage the system. I always say you cannot control your users. You cannot control the data. You can manage it. But you manage it through influence and through association, not through imposing rigid rules. We all think we're terribly logical. We all think we're making these logical decisions. We construct our decision systems around logic. But actually, we're influenced by these things. Not only that, not only influenced by emotions, but the decisions we make, unless we can see the alternatives, unless we can understand the entire information environment surrounding our decisions, we just take the automatic shortcut. We will say fish and chips or fish and fowl because that's easy. Presented with this, what's the answer? Yeah, it's easy now, isn't it? It's actually taking you that long to work it out? We can do it. And actually, there's no reason you should remember 391, but you can now make that shortcut because I've created the shortcut for you. We use shortcuts. Sometimes I play a trick, by the way, and I didn't do it in this presentation. Sometimes I change it to 17 times 24, and the entire audience still shouts out, 391. And then I've got another half an hour explaining why that's wrong. It's like think of the library model, and think about the systems that you're providing to your users, the dashboards, the reports, the analyses. What kind of library are you like? Are you like my old university library where people had to know exactly what they were looking for, and they got the right result, but they had to know what result they wanted in the first place? Or are you providing a browsing experience where people can discover new things that they may not have expected, but which are actually more valuable than what they originally wanted? Provide a mobile experience, a lean-back experience, an experience which encourages through touch and through other interfaces, and touch is coming to your desktop very soon, if not already. Encourage that browsing user experience. You may not be in control of the design of your offices, but think about the social spaces that your users occupy. And you put all these things together, and this is what I call BI for the right side of the brain. And that's what I'm hoping that you can take away today and start thinking about. What are the aesthetic, emotional, and social impacts that I need to consider? Not the technical stuff. We can spend all day, in fact, many of us will spend all day talking about the technical stuff. But keep this in your mind as well, because this is actually, in some ways, more important and will have more impact on the decisions that your users make while you're supporting them. And I hope I've given you some food for thought, and thank you very much for your patience and your time with me. Thank you. And now I think you have a break. You may well need one.
All right, so 10-minute break. If you want to go for the case study presentation with Hayworth, it'll be in here.